Housework is women's business. How shameful to ask your husband, says the husband with a smug face, ordering his wife to do the housework even though she has a broken bone. I think it's the husband who should be ashamed. Is divorce the only option here? That's what I thought, and then our quiet, book-loving daughter dropped a bombshell. We have another child in this house, right? My name is Kay. I'm a fearless 65-year-old who grew up in rural Wyoming, not afraid of frogs or worms. On the other hand, my daughter, who's supposed to grow up in the same rural Wyoming, grew up to be a fragile baby who is even afraid of ants. I wonder if the difference is whether she played in the dirt when she was young or not. There was a time when I regretted a little that I grew up in Wyoming. It was the story of my dark married life. Back in my 20s, my boss at work suggested that I meet a man. XSX. It wasn't exactly a formal matchmaking process, but the man was a business client who was about 3 years my senior. That man later became my husband. It may surprise some that I was introduced to someone by a coworker, but in the countryside, it's not uncommon. I don't know what it's like in the city. I've never lived in one. But in my region, even the professors from the university would recommend blind dates to single women. It was a strange tradition. And being older, my husband was knowledgeable about things I didn't know, and his stories were always interesting. He was deeply trusted by his superiors, incredibly gentle, and was an impeccable man who was attentive to the delicate aspects of a woman. Being him, a man who seemed to know everything, through slightly starstruck eyes, I believe it was only natural that I ended up marrying him. But now I think, I wish someone had slapped me on the cheek at the same speed as a fastball from a top baseball player and told me not to marry him. Our dating period was half a year. We didn't live together before getting married. We quickly got married, and before I knew it, we had a child. Because our dating period was short, it was fun to learn about him in ways I hadn't known before. But when our child turned 2, I started to see things about him that I would have been better off not knowing. Until then, he was reliable, listening to my stories and occasionally giving me advice. Today my boss was bragging and didn't even realize that I'm the one supporting him. It's really frustrating that Celespi, despite the fact that I'm the one supporting him, he acts so important. Yes, you have it tough too. There's always something at work. Me too. I don't need to hear your story. Well, my husband started cutting me off when I started talking. He just wants to talk about himself and wants me to listen to his stories only. It's as if he thinks of me as a trash can for his complaints. He does occasionally listen to my stories, but as soon as the conversation starts to get a bit exciting, he cuts me off with, that's enough, it's too long, get me a beer. Even when it comes to our child, he was the same, and I couldn't consult him about parenting. Looking back, our dates were always without alcohol because he used to drive me home. Is it because he got used to me as a wife and got into a routine? Or is it that his true nature comes out when he gets drunk? No, it could be both. He would have been a great husband if it weren't for the drinking. Every time he interrupted our conversations, I would think, here we go again, but decided to just let it slide, assuming he was tired from work. Then one day, we were invited to the wedding of one of his colleagues. This was a young man we had invited to our own wedding, who had even provided some entertainment during the reception, and now he wanted us to attend his wedding as a couple. But believing it to be the polite thing to do, we naturally attended the event. Spotting a junior colleague at the venue, my husband cheerfully exclaimed, "Hey, congratulations on the wedding." He put his arm around the groom, dressed in his tuxedo, and delivered his warm wishes. I also gave my congratulations and smiled. As my husband and the groom were chatting happily, I heard some troubling words. "Listen, once you're married, make sure you train your wife properly. That's what really matters after marriage. Just make sure she knows that she owes her life to you." The groom was listening with sparkling eyes, obediently saying yes. But I was mortified to be there. Educate your wife? What on earth were these men talking about? Shouldn't they be the ones receiving an education about basic human rights? Naturally, with the festive mood, I couldn't confront my husband and say, "What are you talking about?" Especially considering that my husband was the groom's boss. So I postponed my lecture for when we got home. But once the ceremony was over and we returned home, my husband started drinking and I broached the topic. "You know you really shouldn't talk about educating your wife. Maybe men feel that way, but women just find it unpleasant." I tried to be as polite as possible, considering his mood as he was happily drinking. However, he retorted, "What? You think that way too? Huh. I thought you were different because you do the housework and keep the house clean without me saying anything. I didn't know you were one of those women who don't appreciate their husbands." I was stunned at my husband's words. Sure, I had been playing the role of a wife, imitating what I saw my mother do when I was little. Whenever my husband's drink was empty, I would casually bring him a refill and I took care of the cleaning, laundry, and other chores. I didn't mind doing it and had taken the initiative without giving it much thought, but I realized then that my husband took it for granted that it was a wife's job to do these things. "I am grateful you know. I'm the homemaker and I live off your salary. But I don't think it's right to say things like that to others. Every family has a different atmosphere." Quiet. My husband, who inexplicably lost his temper at my comment, immediately slammed the table. It's only natural for a wife to obey her husband once they're married. That's what it means to be a real man. I'll let you off because it's me, but normally you'd be slapped for arguing with your husband. At the change in his tone from babe to you, I felt like I was seeing my husband's true nature. I was silent, stunned, and my husband said, "I didn't think you were such a naive woman," dramatically pouring the rest of his beer down the sink, crushing the can roughly, and stomping up to our second-floor bedroom. His actions seemed to say, "I'm angry, be afraid. Listen to what I say." Persistent, needless to say. I was immediately turned off by my husband, who thought winning was getting angry and couldn't control his emotions. The next morning, my husband woke up and, as if nothing had happened the day before, said to me my tie, instructing me to bring his change of clothes. Normally, I would have followed his instructions without thinking, but that day I found myself thinking, why do I have to do this? Thinking back, my father, to borrow my husband's words, was a real man too. My mother always looked after him, and I grew up thinking that was what marriage was supposed to be. But now I wonder if my father was the same way, a domineering husband. Back then, without the internet, it was hard to know what a domineering husband was. I could only get an idea from a story about a domineering man, but the man in that story seemed much more loving than my husband. At least in the story world, there was no terrifying sound to scare the other person. But despite my husband's nonchalant attitude in the morning, there have been changes since that day. For example, my makeup. When I tried a slightly brighter pink eyeshadow for the spring, he shouted at me, "A married woman shouldn't use a color that attracts men." Turning the situation around, I could have retorted, "Would you be charmed by a woman in full pink, like a Barbie?" But responding would have been bothersome, so I kept quiet. Moreover, when I tried to style my hair a bit, according to the latest fashion trends, he'd yell, "At your age, don't dress so horribly." Do you want to embarrass me? After he comes home, his commands like dinner and "Hey, where's my water?" have been treated as normal due to the environment I grew up in. However, even my own father never made remarks about his wife's appearance like my husband does. Ever since I began to object, my husband started to enforce his idea of what a woman should be. I love my parents, but I think if I'd been raised in a more egalitarian household, I would have realized my husband's abnormal behavior sooner. Reflecting upon it, there were many instances that come to mind. The term "then on" actually started to feel sickened by my husband, but I had a 4-year-old daughter at the time. She was already attending kindergarten, and if we divorced, I was worried about having to move her to another school, and whether I, as a stay-at-home mother, could make ends meet. These are tough times for single parents. At the rate of finding part-time work or employment significantly decreases just by being a single mother. I decided to keep living with my husband and save up money by working part-time. That's what I had in mind. Hey, I want to start working part-time. Believing that there's no time like the present, I had seized an opportunity to express my desire to work to my husband. But the next moment, there was a loud sound as my husband slammed the table. I found him standing there with a livid expression. I was so surprised that I shrunk back and was at a loss for words. You want to work? Does that mean my earnings aren't enough for you? Since my goal was to get a divorce, that statement was somewhat true. No, it's just that I'm afraid I'll lose touch with society if I only focus on raising our child. And might end up teaching her outdated values if I don't keep learning from society myself. Are you trying to belittle my income with those words? No, I get it. You just don't want to do housework. Even if you do start working, I'll make sure you handle all the household chores. His misjudgment was truly off the mark, and it made me less willing to do housework. I finally lost my temper and blurted out, "I'm tired of living with you. Let's break up." He must not have seen it coming. My husband was gaping, his eyes and mouth wide open in shock. Do you realize what you're saying?" "Yes, I'm well aware that it means I'll be better off. I'll take our daughter with me. I can rely on my parents for a while, and I'll figure out the job situation." It was a bit embarrassing to admit that I would rely on my parents, but I figured they would forgive me once things had settled down and I was able to help them out again. Phew. It was in that moment that I realized just how abruptly a marriage could come to an end. Wait, reconsider. I was wrong. Actually, I don't even know what I did wrong, so I need you to tell me. I'll change. My husband's words, admitting he didn't even know what he'd done wrong, were refreshingly honest, and I found myself appreciating that. It was only natural. He didn't know, since our way of thinking was fundamentally different. It was much better than him pretending to understand and just apologizing. I sincerely expressed to him that I was tired from our differences and the issues I had with his behavior, and that I couldn't envision a future where things would work out. I truly didn't realize that I was making you suffer so much. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk about it, but you always interrupt me, and we never have a proper discussion. I'm just tired. I promise I won't do that anymore. But you give me another chance? It would hurt too much to be separated from our daughter and from you. My husband said, tears streaming down his face. This was the first time I'd ever seen him cry. Despite everything, it was hard to see the man I loved, the man I had married, in tears. I knew how much he adored our daughter. So I laid down the law. To lay down the law, saying, there's an old saying, even the patience of a saint has limits. But I'm no saint. Of course, I have a limit. We both gave ground. Abandoned my part-time job ambitions, and he agreed to rethink his attitude, which allowed us to back away from the brink of divorce. We've had close to 7 peaceful years since then. Well, there were occasional flashes of his overbearing husband routine, but I believe he managed it well in his own way, quickly apologizing for any slip-ups. So, I let those go. However, one day it was decided that my husband would go on a 2-year business assignment alone. Priya of the making of making our elementary school-age child switch schools was too heartbreaking, so my husband chose to take the assignment alone. However, this decision would drastically alter the fate of our family. But when he returned from his 2-year assignment, as scheduled, he had become even more of a domineering husband. Living alone on assignment, maybe it was the backlash of having to do everything for himself. Or perhaps his promotion, where he was ordering around subordinates, had somehow crept into his behavior at home. I didn't quite understand the change in his mindset, but it was clear that his time alone had fostered an even more self-centered and troublesome husband. To give a small example, after he came back, he frequently forgot to turn off the bathroom lights or left the tap not completely shut off. Of course, I scolded him for this. After all, the electricity and water bills are nothing to sneeze at. But then he would retort, "It's my money, so I can use it as I want." Besides, if you see the light on, why don't you just turn it off instead of nitpicking? Despite my telling him it's wrong to leave things on, he would become irrationally angry, saying the one who notices should naturally turn it off. Criticizing me for this shows how petty you are. His reaction was simply ridiculous. Pigs might fly. Maybe because his place of assignment was close to his parents' house, he visited them frequently. Whenever there was a small incident, he would say, "My mom is old, but she doesn't mess up like you do." For instance, if I had served daily food because I didn't have time after a neighborhood gathering, or if I served leftover ingredients from our child's picnic lunch, he would criticize me relentlessly. Just our child happily eats the food, and it's not like I'm serving deli food every day. The picnic lunch ingredients were homemade. Sure, I occasionally take shortcuts, but what's wrong with relying on convenient options now and then? Running a household is hard work, you know? I'm raising a child, attending open school days, and going to PTA meetings. Seeing a guy who doesn't understand any of this, just complaining while eating more than his fair share, really makes my blood boil. I've been thinking, if you're so obsessed with homemade food, why don't you cook? I was running out of patience. I had no reason to put up with complaints from a man. Complaints from a man who hadn't set foot in the kitchen since we moved into this house. I remember thinking how true this saying is. It is good to have a husband who is healthy and out of the house. It's the idea of divorce began to cross my mind again after a long time. Then one day, on my way to the grocery store, I missed a step on the stairs, fell, and had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I fractured my ankle. Incredibly, it's going to take about 3 months to fully recover. The doctor, laughing lightly, suggested that if things progress well, I could recover sooner. However, I suspected that was just a tactic to cheer me up. At least, the pain was too much for me to feel optimistic about such a speedy recovery. If there's anything good about it, it was that it wasn't my dominant foot, but even so, it was inconvenient for everything I had to do. Being taken in an ambulance meant I had to ask my husband to pick me up, which made me feel a mixture of guilt and reluctance. When I thanked him for coming to the hospital, he, ever the charmer in Pewick, said, "I was worried." "Does it hurt?" in gentle voice. If he could keep up this attitude while I'm injured, that would be a relief. My hopes were brutally shattered later. It happened when I returned home. "Where's dinner?" My husband asked, so I suggested. "It's hard to do the housework with this foot." "I'm sorry, but could you help with the housework until my foot gets better?" Or could even share the work in the kitchen, each of us doing what we can. I thought that even my husband wouldn't say I don't care. You do it to the injured person right in front of him. But he retorted, "Huh? What are you talking about? Housework is what women do. Know your shame to ask your husband." celebrity with a self-satisfied expression. My husband raised his voice as if he were stating the obvious. Even when your wife is injured, you're absolutely unsparing. I see. It was the moment I felt not just astonishment, but even contempt. It seems we have another child in this house. My little brother, maybe? Tarima, the one who smirked and blurted out this while resting her cheek in her hand at the living room table, possibly in the middle of her homework, was our usually quiet daughter. My husband reflexively exclaimed, "Huh? What are you talking about? You don't have a brother, do you?" He asked our daughter. "I do. A big little brother is right there." My husband, who was darting his gaze around at the finger pointed at him, looked at me with an expression that seemed to say, "Maybe." His face was so silly that I was about to burst out laughing. He said, "You are a child, a little brother. Because your intelligence is lower than mine and you can't even make your own meals. I can make my own food, you knows," our daughter chuckled mischievously. "Wait, this is between your mother and me. It's not something for you to butt into. It's like education for your mother. What can a fool educate? There's nothing for mom to learn from someone who can't even bring their own water, let alone make a meal." Our daughter had completely looked down on her father. Father, normally I would reprimand her, saying, "Don't say things like that to your father." But, well, my husband isn't impressive enough, so it can't be helped. First of all, I don't really think of you as a father, so don't act so high and mighty, okay? After all, it's always mom who comes to the parent-teacher conference and listens to my worries. Even when I was little, when I asked you to play, you were always busy with the horse racing broadcast. No, there were times when I played with you, right? Come on, remember. I remember being made to weed the garden. Dad was mostly resting. Is that play? If it was a date, I'd have dumped you. First of all, the condescending attitude of "I played with you" is annoying. Kristen, our junior high school daughter's sharp tongue, now a bit more precocious, was a clean hit on my husband. But there were times when we had family time. Do you mean when Dad was talking unilaterally? Don't you mean Dad's one-man show? At our daughter's laughter, I couldn't help but burst out laughing too. My husband's face was turning red. "I've been loving you two all this time. You haven't done much, have you? If the person you say you love doesn't remember being loved, it's just self-satisfaction." At our daughter's sharp logic, my husband finally fell silent. His figure seemed to shrink a bit. "You've gone quiet. Does Dad have any more self-proclaimed good relationship episodes?" I feel like I could refute any of them. At our daughter's grin, my husband just teared up and said nothing. He doesn't do housework or child rearing, doesn't play with our daughter, but calls himself a good dad, so it must have been quite a shock. At my daughter, still a child, has never acknowledged him as a good father. I can only conclude that his image of himself as a good father is just self-satisfaction, given what my daughter says. "Hey, can I say something I've been thinking about for a while?" Upon hearing my question, my daughter answers, "Sure." I think I have a pretty good idea of what you're going to say. Would it be okay if we got a divorce? As far as I'm concerned, there's no problem. I used to lock myself in my room right away because I found Dad's boasting at the dinner table so annoying. I've been living as if Dad wasn't there in the first place. Her bombshell leaves my husband pale and nearly in tears. But without paying any heed to that, my daughter says, I'm about to be in high school and I want to get a part-time job. I'll support you, Mom. Let's live together. Ah, how reliable of you. Thank you. Hold on a minute. Our divorce discussion is cut off by my husband. However, my daughter ignores him and says, men who cling on are unattractive, you know. Okay, go pack your stuff. She even pushes him out towards the staircase to the second floor, where our rooms are. To my husband, I say with a smile, consult with an attorney. Not understanding that he had no grounds to resist, my husband is sounding like a minor character in a villain's role. He spat out, "Don't come crying to me when you regret this." He then packed his stuff and left our house. For about 6 months after that, my husband resisted the divorce, saying things like, I don't want a divorces, and I want to see my daughter. But when my daughter made an outrageous proposal, if you win at rock, paper, scissors, I'll consider it. My husband, not in his right mind, agreed and lost. And so we are now officially divorced. Of course, my daughter came to live with me, and our house became ours in the property division, and we also received child support. The car, which was joint property, was old, and I didn't have a license, so I let him have it. From time to time, he sent me letters with photos of himself and the sky, along with poems like, I realized how important you were to me after I lost you, and this is how I am now. My daughter had fun altering her father's photos with markers, in the same spirit as doodling on a picture of Xavier in her history textbook. He seemed to keep reaching out to us without remarrying, but it was amusing that his feelings didn't reach my daughter at all. After we finished receiving child support, my daughter and I moved, and we lost all contact with him. On the other hand, my daughter worked part-time as she said she would and graduated from high school, then went on to a fairly good university in the state. By the way, I didn't spend the living expenses my daughter gave me, and I passed them on to her as a dowry when she got married. Although I'm a mother with neither skills nor education, I believe that if I try hard with will and determination, I can manage somehow. My daughter's husband is a very gentle person, and my daughter is rather dominant, so I'm a little worried. The husband said, I like being led around, so I guess it's okay. Well, they were blessed with 4 children, so I guess they're doing well. Then my daughter got married. I lived alone for a while, but at my son-in-law's suggestion, I moved in with them. It's only been a few years. Moreover, my son-in-law even made the house barrier free for me when I moved. I'm so grateful to such a kind son-in-law. The grandchildren are adorable, and I'm enjoying taking part in child-rearing again after a long time. As for these days, I'm thinking of protecting this lively home together with my daughter and son-in-law. So that's what was going on? As I looked on at my sister's in-laws' house from afar, the moment I touched the truth, I was speechless. I wonder what kind of intentions my sister's husband and his family had towards her all this time. How many times had they deceived my sister with an impassive face? Unforgivable. No matter what, I'm going to drag you all to hell. My name is Sally. At the age of 45, when I put on my funeral attire for the first time in a while, I realized with dismay that I couldn't zip up the dress at my stomach area. At first glance, I thought I hadn't changed my figure that much from the past, but it's clear that I've been storing visceral fat. The first time I wore this dress was when I was 30. Anjabals and my sister Jane, who had a weak heart since she was a child, sadly passed away at the young age of 27. She had exacerbated pneumonia, and it led to heart failure. Oddly enough, I was the only one who had a conversation with Jane for the last time, as I happened to be visiting her hospital room that day. Agency, I'm sure she had a lot of things she wanted to do, as she was only in her second year of marriage. She probably never thought she would leave this world like this. When I remember the smile on Jane's face as she said she wanted to walk under the autumn leaves after she was discharged, it made me feel desolate. A pity on the day of the funeral, when I was unable to accept the tragedy that befell my beloved sister, an incident occurred. It was just before the ceremony began. When I went to the restroom, I saw Jane's husband, Bob, talking on the phone at a nearby lounge. Yeah, once the funeral is over and Christmas time comes around, things should calm down a bit. Yeah, you're right. No, we better lie low until Mass for the deceased about a year later. I don't usually eavesdrop on people's phone conversations, but this time I was intrigued by the content. What does he mean, lie low until Mass for the deceased about a year later? It means Jane, right? The way Bob speaks, it doesn't feel like a conversation with a coworker. All of my sister's relatives were attending the ceremony. Who could he be talking to? Sorry for making you wait? Yeah, I understand. No, the kid is fine. They don't suspect anything. Neither my wife nor anyone in this family has noticed that I have a child. Just stay at home and relax. What? I was taken aback. Did he just say he has a child? For the record, there are no children between Jane and Bob. Since it was unsure whether Jane's body could withstand childbirth, the two chose not to have children. Parents were in their first marriages, and we never heard anything about Bob having a child. What the hell is going on? To be honest, I was just confused by Bob's baffling conversation, and my thoughts were in a mess. However, at the experience, I suddenly remembered the words Jane desperately tried to tell me just before she was taken into the surgery. There's a child at home. After that, as Jane lost consciousness and passed away a few days later without ever waking up, so I couldn't hear the rest. I was the only one who heard those words. Until now, the shock of losing Jane was so great that I didn't have the time to think about what those words meant. But when I connected Jane's words about home and what Bob said about stay at home, in the house where they used to live, Ellie wouldn't call it her parents' house. She'd just call it home. Yet, there are no children in our family home either. Upon a little reflection, a sudden realization hit me. Could it be the child on the phone with Bob is living at Bob's parents' home? When that thought occurred to me, I couldn't sit still. If that were true, I don't think I could forgive Bob. After paying my respects at Jane's memorial service, I was eager to test my theory. I immediately left the funeral home and headed straight for Bob's parents' house. Bob's parents' house is within walking distance from the house where Jane and her husband lived. Bob, being an only child and his parents aging, had decided to live close by. Jane had concerns about building their house close to her in-laws, worrying if she could get along with the increased family interactions. However, in reality, they rarely returned home and had virtually no family interactions. Perhaps that's why, even at this funeral, Bob's parents didn't seem particularly saddened by Jane's misfortune. Perhaps, if anything, they seemed more interested in playing with their phones, which I found rather disconcerting. Well, I guess that's what it comes to when the in-law relationship is so distant. At a time like this, they could at least pretend to be more sympathetic. Recalling their parents' attitudes, I finally arrived at Bob's parents' house. I was hesitant to ring the doorbell. There shouldn't be anyone in the house. Everyone was supposed to be at Jane's funeral. But what if someone came out? What would I say to that person? I still didn't have any evidence of Bob's infidelity. I wasn't confident in confronting an adversary with my lack of information. While pondering this, I crept around to the back of the house and peeked inside. The window was not closed, and I could see the entire room. Could someone really be there? Just as my heart skipped a beat. Hey, stop that. Look, no wriggling. Yeah. Out into the yard ran a child, chased by an unfamiliar woman. I instinctively hid and watched the two from the shadows. The child looked very much like Bob. His steps were unsteady, probably only a few months since he started walking. The woman appeared to be about the same age as Bob. Cutly drilled to the extremity, the features of her eyes were quite similar to the child's, leading me to believe she was undoubtedly the mother. Oh God, did Bob really betray my sister? When did he start his betrayal? When did Jane realize this? Even though the pieces of my suspicions fit neatly together, there were so many other things that I was curious about, and I didn't feel any relief. On the contrary, I even felt tears welling up. I will never forgive him. In place of my sister, after I vowed to send that man straight to hell, I was able to return to the funeral home and attend my sister's burial in the churchyard. Although everyone attending the service suspected that I had left in the middle, when I told them that I could not bear the shock of losing Jane, it seemed like they understood. Oh, I doubt anyone would think I went to Bob's house, but it was a relief that my sister's in-laws did not suspect anything strange, even in the slightest. The next day, I immediately decided to request a personal investigation on Bob from the only private investigator in town. To my surprise, it was run by Jane's friend. Layla. She attended the funeral, so I remembered her quite well. And Layla informed me that Jane had also requested an investigation on her husband. After informing her about the investigation, Jane fell ill and passed away. Although I have confidentiality obligations, I believe Jane would have wanted you to know this as she loved you very much, she said. It's that week. Layla shared the circumstances and results of the investigation that Jane had requested. Once, despite being engaged, Jane and Bob nearly split up. The cause was what you'd call Bob's cold feet. Just half a year left before their wedding. Bob said he had no confidence in his ability to protect Jane, who had a weak heart, and that he wanted some distance. After much deliberation, Jane accepted this request and decided to put some distance between her and Bob. However, in about 2 months, apologized and said that he wanted to marry Jane after all, so everything worked out and they were able to hold the wedding. After that, Sigdai your konst SBSKSTN diligently, even on his holidays, because he wanted to give Jane a house in the future. Although it seemed like they didn't have much time together, Jane spoke about it like she was bragging, so I thought everything must be fine now. But I was wrong. In fact, right after getting engaged to Jane, Bob had started an affair with his childhood friend, Nancy. Apparently Bob and Nancy had once dated, but broke up due to a small disagreement. When Nancy reached out to him, it reignited old feelings. And to add insult to injury, it was a lie that Bob got cold feet. Around that time, Nancy got pregnant, and Bob was torn about divorcing Jane to marry her. It seemed he had even discussed this with some friends. Nancy was firm in her stand. If you stay with me, I won't ask to get married, but I am going to have this baby. Bob did not want to break up with her, but he also did not want to tell his wife, Jane, that he had a child with another woman. At the same time, he couldn't refuse to acknowledge a child from another relationship. Acknowledged from a woman he loves, he did not want her to have the baby. But she was adamant about keeping it. In the end, Bob confided in his parents about this, only for them to suggest this will be our first grandchild. So let her have the baby. Bob's parents had always advocated for his marriage to Nancy, whom they knew well from their childhood. Moreover, they seemed to dislike Jane because she was frail and might not provide them with a grandchild, as they had often complained about this to others. Fortunately, Jane is frail, and she won't last long. Once she's gone, acknowledge the child and marry Nancy. They proposed. Nancy was all for this. Although it was a twisted plan, it was appealing to Bob. If his parents say so, then it must be all right. And with that, it was decided that Nancy would have the child. Nancy, like Bob, was an only child, and her parents were already deceased. Therefore, Bob's parents were always over at Nancy's house taking care of her. Throughout her pregnancy, the narrative of Bob working hard Jane immediately after their marriage was also a lie. He was probably visiting his newborn baby. During that time, there were eyewitness accounts of Bob frequently visiting Nancy's house. From this, it's likely that the excuse of moving, because they were worried about their elderly parents, was a lie, and they actually wanted to be closer to the child. As the child grew, they respected the in-laws' desire to see their grandchild grow more closely. And it seems that Nancy and the child spent more time at in-laws' house, so by coming up with various reasons, keeping my sister away from her in-laws, they no longer returned home. It's infuriating that they're promoting infidelity as a family. It was just a month ago when my sister noticed Bob's infidelity. My sister, who was feeling ill, had left work early and was sleeping at home, probably unaware that Jane was home. Bob, who rarely texted or called when Jane is around, came home a bit earlier than usual that day, and apparently made a call somewhere. I got off work early. Can I come over? Now my wife... She's at work. I don't think she'll find out. She seems to be getting sick a lot lately, and might go to sleep early if I say I'm working late. I think I can stay longer with you. Yeah. I also want to live with Nancy and the kids soon. Every time she says she's not feeling well, I think she won't last much longer. Actually, I'm looking forward to it every time. Just imagining how Jane felt hearing that from her sickbed makes my heart ache. This incident made Jane aware of Bob's infidelities, and she seemed to have enlisted the help of a private investigator run by her friend Layla. The results of the investigation came out, and just when she was about to confront him with a divorce, she saddened. For a divorce, she collapsed and passed away. When Layla finished telling me all this, she lowered her gaze and said Jane must have been heartbroken. I couldn't agree more. I want to avenge Jane's resentment. I couldn't stand the thought of Bob and his parents getting a grandchild and Bob remarrying. But I've just become aware of everything, and I don't know what to do. After some thought, I had an idea. Layla, are you good with computers? At my words, Layla smiled and said, leave it to me. The next day, I headed to my sister's in-law's home. When I rang the doorbell, my sister's mother-in-law appeared on the monitor, surprised at my appearance. Oh, Sally, what's going on? She asked with a somewhat heightened voice. I have something to discuss with the family about Jane's belongings. Do you have a moment? Hearing my words, my sister's mother-in-law went silent and the intercom went off. Oh, maybe she won't let me in. Feeling a bit anxious, I waited a while, and then Bob appeared saying, I'm sorry, Sally, the room was a mess, so I had to clean it up a bit. Please come in. Oh, Bob, you're here. Perfect timing. At my smile, Bob's expression stiffened. He thinks I haven't noticed his infidelity yet. His face stiffens, probably because he has something to hide. In fact, I had just seen the figure of his mistress and their child from the window. I bet they were the ones he was cleaning up. I wonder which room they're in. Bob and my sister's in-laws seem to be uneasy as they watch me, who they've allowed into the room. As soon as I took a sip of the tea, they served me as if he had read the situation. Bob asked, what's this about Jane's belongings? It's about this thing. So I laid out a photograph on the table. Bob and his parents were frozen on the spot as they looked at the photo. Bob, who is this woman? What? No, I don't know her. In the photo, Bob and a woman were in bed together the other day. This was sent to our house. It said that Bob is having an affair. At my words, his parents glared at Bob, and Bob frantically shook his head. Wait, I don't remember this photo, shouted Bob as I watched him. I laid out more photographs. In each photo, Bob and a woman were seen kissing or on a date at a nearby amusement park. People who cheat don't admit to their memory lapses, dude. I amused, to which my sister's mother-in-law sharply retorted, "What are you implying, young lady? No, you've got it all wrong, Mom. I don't know anything about this. Stop lying." "Then what's this picture about? Even though you have a child with Nancy." "A child?" I reacted immediately to my sister's mother-in-law's words. My sister's father-in-law opened his mouth guiltily, uttering, "Oh. Do you mean this child? And is this woman Nancy?" With that, I presented a photograph of Bob holding a child. "What?" It's the entire in-law family lost their words, and although Bob continued to deny the accusation, my sister's mother-in-law slapped him, calling him a worthless son. "Do you have other children too?" "Listen to me, please." "Mom, Dad." However, my sister's in-laws ignored Bob's pleas, repeatedly berating him for betraying their beloved grandchild. "What the hell? Bringing this nonsense here?" The picture was sent to our house. I don't know much about it either. I came here to ask for clarification, but it seems Bob does have a child. I braced myself for a confrontation, and Bob was lost for words. But honestly, Papa's no other affair besides Nancy. Oh, I don't intend to tell them this, as I don't want to be accused of defamation later on. But this picture is a composite one that I had Layla make. I could have used a real picture of the child with the actual person Bob cheated with, but I chose a composite photo due to certain considerations. I planned to corner him by pressing him about the child, but it was fortunate that my sister's mother-in-law blurted out the truth sooner than I expected. "So, your silence means it's true, right? Earlier, your mother also mentioned something about a child in Nancy." Following Bob, my sister's in-laws also froze in their place. The note that came with the picture said these children are being taken care of in this house. It's not true. My sister's mother-in-law quickly denied my statement. "Are you sure?" "Of course it's not true." "Then show me all the rooms." Without waiting for their approval, I stood up from my seat and headed towards the room next door. "Hey, wait a minute. You can't just snoop around other people's houses." Bob raised his voice. "My kids, if there's nothing to hide, then you should show me. Don't worry, I don't mind a bit of mess. That's not the point." "Then what's the issue?" "Well," without waiting for Bob's answer, I shook off my sister's in-laws' attempts to stop me and peeked into the next room. She's not here then. Deciding so, I ascended to the second floor. Although I was considerably impeded and scraped my knee, this was nothing compared to my sister's pain. I would endure any number of fresh wounds. Brushing off my sister's in-laws, I opened the door to the room on the second floor, kicking aside Bob as I did so. She was there. It's in the room. Nancy and a child were sitting on the bed. Well, now who do we have here? Literally a different woman and child from the ones in the picture. What's going on? At my words, Bob turned pale and Nancy gave me a puzzled look, saying, "A picture." Yes, it seems like Bob here has been cheating while my sister was around. Look at this picture. As I showed the doctored photo to Nancy, her face distorted in anger and she crumpled the picture. "What the hell is this? You had another woman teen Tweetowit's boy. That's not it." "Nancy, listen. Having received satisfactory testimony," I chimed in saying, "So you were indeed involved with another woman, huh, Bob?" My sister's mother and father-in-law were speechless, holding their heads at this chaotic scene. "Why, you told me I was the one, said we didn't have to get married, and I wanted to have a child and be with you. You had another. Nancy, this is probably a misunderstanding, a look-alike or Photoshop." "What do you mean, probably?" "You can't absolutely deny it. I can't trust you anymore." For a moment, I was taken aback at the mention of Photoshop, but since Bob was too flustered to deny it properly. Nancy's suspicions were at an all-time high. Man who's as indecisive as this one, you'd be better off not trusting him. After all, he ruined my sister's life. And my grave advice. Nancy's face stiffened. She too had her life turned upside down by this, but she likely understands that given her expression. I don't need to tell her anything. Oh, no. I need to act like I'm on Nancy's side and get her to listen to me. As for my goal of not letting any of Bob's family nor Nancy be happy. "I see," Nancy muttered. "Wait. Nancy, I'm serious about you." I interrupted Bob's desperate attempt to woo Nancy. "So, you weren't serious about my sister, but you told her you were, even made marriage vows to her? Looks like you really are an untrustworthy man." "Bob?" At my words, Nancy's face darkened. Brisked with the doctored photo and all, she seemed to start doubting whether his words were sincere. Good, good. If you were serious, you wouldn't be two-timing from the start. No matter the reasons, you'd stick to one person. As I emphasized my point, Nancy's face grew even darker. Bob's face was as pale as a ghost. He must have sensed the growing distance in Nancy's feelings. "We should break up. Bob, I don't want to be your convenient woman. No matter what you say, after seeing that photo, I can't trust you anymore. I could tolerate being the second woman, but I just can't bear the idea of becoming the third one." As tears streamed down Nancy's face, Bob reflexively reached for her hand and shouted, "Please hear me out." But Nancy shook off Bob's grasp, declaring, "I don't need you to acknowledge the child anymore. Just leave me alone." As she walked out of the house with her child, while Bob's entire family was despondent from losing both the child and the planned second wife, I was inwardly pumping my fist. Later, I made Bob write a legal document ending our family relations, cutting all ties with our family. The inheritance left by my sister, which rights would have been Bob's, was also successfully made to be relinquished by him. My rather stern father, having heard everything from me, roared into my sister's in-laws' home. My sister's in-laws were completely taken aback and seemed to have persuaded him to renounce the inheritance, wanting no more to do with our family. Well, even though we call it my sister's inheritance, it was a trifling amount, but it was good that not even a single cent of my sister's assets went to him. On the day I took the photos to Bob's house, it seems one of the windows was left open. Consequently, our commotion and conversation could be heard clearly outside. Just along with that, and revelations from Nancy's friend who lived nearby, everything that transpired in Bob's house was laid bare to the whole neighborhood. As a result, Bob's house was rumored to be cursed, and Bob quit his job and fled from our town with his parents. Meanwhile, Nancy showed up at our family home out of the blue after about 2 months. She arrived with $50,000 in hand to apologize and thank me for helping her see the truth, and she wanted to make amends for how she had treated my sister. I should have considered Nancy's feelings, but money can't heal the pain my sister endured. It didn't seem right for us to forgive something the person themselves couldn't forgive just because we were given money. Understood her gratitude, but we did not want any money from someone who had done such a disgraceful thing. So I refused to accept anything. Instead, we insisted that the money be donated to a nearby children's home where my sister used to work. Do question whether such a woman would actually donate. Of course, I accompanied her to make sure the donation was made properly, so you can rest assured. If the money is used this way, I'm sure my sister would be pleased. I hope the children with a future ahead of them can find happiness, also on my sister's behalf. As for me, it's embarrassing to admit, but I suffered from the loss of my sister for a while, even falling into mental illness. There was a period when it got so bad I even quit my job, but I've gradually recovered and am now working in Layla's detective agency. Layla and I became very close after that incident. I think it's because we were comrades who had lost something important in such a way. We found something in common. Although I didn't have a positive image of marriage due to what happened to my sister after being with my partner for 4 years, we got married last year. The experience of losing my sister in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic made me realize that I never know when I will not be able to be by the side of my loved ones, so I decided to get married. I want to spend every moment with those I care for, no room for regrets. Just watch me. Tom, I promise to live a long, full life for the both of us. When I get to where you are, I'll share all the fun. With that, I will live vibrantly to the max, yeah. A sharp, piercing sound echoed through the church. Immediately, my cheek began to burn with pain. Wait, did I just get slapped? How dare you lay hands on my man? A woman yelled. But whatever. I don't need a man who plays around like this. I'll give him to you. The woman who slapped me said, laughing in disbelief. My name is Amy. At 26, I'm working as an office worker. I've been dating my boyfriend, Kevin, for 3 years now, and I'm starting to wonder if it's about time. About time for what? Well, of course, I mean marriage. I've heard that if you date for too long, you might become complacent and miss your opportunity to tie the knot. Yet if I keep waiting as is, who knows when we'll ever get married? So, I figure now is the time to speak up. The days of silent waiting are over. In this day and age, I think it's perfectly fine for women to make the first move. There's even a term for it, a reverse proposal. So one day after work, we met up and went to a ramen shop. There we agreed to get married with a simple exchange. How about now? Sounds good. Thinking it's a bland proposal. Well, yes, there was a time when I dreamt of something more. Like a beautiful scenic viewpoint at night. Or at a fancy restaurant. Or even a big bouquet of flowers from him. But after 3 years together, those dreams tend to fade. I don't know about others, but I'm pretty pragmatic. Marriage is a turning point in life and a new beginning. I'm the type who would rather focus on the upcoming married life rather than the proposal itself. Anyway, the point is, we finally decided to get married. It's a cause for celebration. I thought Kevin might not be too keen or that he might leave all the wedding planning to me. But to my surprise, he was quite enthusiastic. He asks about the ceremony. I want to be the star of the show at least once in my life, he said. As for me, I'm equally excited and it's great to see him so motivated. Since we'll be taking time off work for our honeymoon after the wedding, I'm cramming in work to make sure I can leave without any worries. Naturally, this makes us very busy. But since I don't want to compromise on the planning, we need to find time to discuss it. As for even sacrificing our weekends, it's just that hectic. Today, again, without a glance at the beautiful weather outside. Kevin and I were holed up in our room, talking things through. A date. What's that? Is it tasty? Till the wedding. We're a team aiming for the success of a major project, our wedding. There's no time for dates. It's in this fighting spirit, we were reviewing estimates for wedding venues when I heard Kevin say, "Not again," and I looked up, looking at his cell phone screen. Kevin seemed rather annoyed. "What's up?" I asked. Just an old friend being overly persistent with their messages. Someone you're not close with. Yeah. It's been years since we drifted apart. How do they have your contact info then? A mutual friend from high school gave it out. Oh no, that's really not cool. I got pretty mad and they apologized, but it was already too late. Why not just block the number? I tried, but this person just makes new accounts to get in touch. That's kinda creepy. It's creeping me out too. This sounds like stalker level stuff, doesn't it? So who is this person? Like a man with a thick beard or something. A beard's your pet peeve. Amy, I'm glad mine isn't that thick. I'd still like you, even if you had a thick beard. Kevin, oh you. Why are you blushing? We're getting married soon, you know. I to be and sell. We've been dating for 3 years, but he's still pretty shy. Well, that's one of the things I fell for, his purity. But if I ever said that, he'd probably turn red, so I kept it to myself. So, who is this person? Well, it's not a guy. Oh, a woman? I'm not the type of woman to make a big fuss just because a woman is contacting my soon-to-be husband. Of course, if they seemed overly friendly, that'd be a different story. But it seems like he's not comfortable with her, so there's no reason for me to make a fuss. But it's natural to be curious, isn't it? Going to the lengths of making new accounts just to reach him. So, who is she? She's my ex. Well, I didn't expect it to be his ex. But it was over between us even before high school graduation. We broke up because she cheated on me when we were both too busy studying for the exams. Really? Yes. Since graduation. I've not been in touch with her at all. Until she recently started to message me again. I had even forgotten she existed. I see. Judging by his reaction, he didn't seem to be lying. He's probably telling the truth. Then why is she contacting him? And so persistently, I announced our wedding to a group chat on Facebook because I couldn't meet everyone in person. I see. That's when she started sending me messages directly. What did the messages say? You're better off not knowing. How could he say that and expect me not to be curious? I swiftly grabbed his phone out of his hand. Maybe it was an invasion of his privacy, but I had a right to know. Maybe he understood my determination, as he didn't try to take the phone back. So, without hesitation, I decided to read the messages. What the hell is this? Indeed, the content was something I wish he hadn't shown me. The one named Holly seems to be opposed to getting married, starting with isn't it a bit early for marriage, and from there it's an onslaught of messages. You're bound to fail, you should quit. Are you being taken advantage of because you're rushing into marriage? Is your partner only after your money? Marriage is hell, you know. She goes on adding, I'm the only one who understands Kevin. Understands Kevin as in from high school. How can she say that without even knowing what he's like now? The worst part was when she insisted on seeing a photo of me, who is supposed to be his bride, and when he refused, she assumed she must be ugly for sure. Even if I weren't particularly attractive, he chose me. Does she think a relationship with someone chosen for their looks would last? What matters is what's inside. Man, she sounds intense. She was pretty harsh back in the day too, but she wasn't this bad. Didn't you break up with her because she cheated on you? They were, well yeah, behind the school building. Seeing him dodge the question and his face darken was more than enough to understand. Witnessing the scene, especially between a friend and his girlfriend, must have been a big shock. Did you distance yourself from that male friend too? At least he's distancing himself from your ex-girlfriend, right? Look at her, with how often she contacts me. I'd assume she's moved on by now. Option, all of this might be chalked up to youthful indiscretion, but that's why the shock was so big. Unlike adults, the love of high school kids is pure and unforgettable. I understand that. Well, I didn't have a boyfriend during my adolescence. He still seems to be receiving messages from his ex-girlfriend, but he's not trying to hide it, and I've stopped worrying about it. Just when I was getting busy and starting to forget about the existence of his ex-girlfriend, our wedding day finally arrived. A church attached to the hotel where the reception is taking place. I, the the nervous bride, arm in arm with my equally tense father, I walked down the aisle. Everyone is paying attention to me. This is probably a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Caught up in this strange elation, I'm in a good mood, that with my spirits high. I now link arms with Kevin, but the foreign pastor adds to the atmosphere. And then, right at the moment when every bride's father would want to close his eyes, bang! The church doors swing open with force. Wait, I'm sure I wasn't the only one who said that. Kevin standing at the front, and various voices from the seats of the attendees. Sure, as everyone's attention turns, standing at the violently opened door is a woman we don't recognize. Ray, who? An unknown woman. Neither a coworker nor a friend. A truly unfamiliar woman. The moment she saw Kevin, who was as confused as I was, her eyes popped out in surprise, wide open. Seeing Kevin like that, I understood. Could it be Polly? When I ask in a whisper that only he can hear, he nods slightly. I see. So is this going to be like that famous movie scene? She couldn't have come to steal him away, could she? With a grim expression, the ex-girlfriend marches up with heavy footsteps. Owen steps in to stop her, too taken aback by the situation. Taking advantage of this, the ex-girlfriend gets closer and closer to us. I can't imagine Kevin going with his ex-girlfriend. But against my better judgment, my body moved. I spread my arms wide in front of him, standing my ground, refusing to let her take him. And then no. I might scream, and the shrill sound echoed almost simultaneously. Then, what followed was an eerie silence. What just happened? For a moment, I didn't understand what was happening. However, the heat spreading across my cheek immediately after made me realize the situation. Amy, are you okay? A moment later, Kevin peered into my face. Looking at his worried expression, I understood that something was really wrong. When I hurriedly touched my cheek, it felt hot, as if burned. Him. That's what you get for touching another woman's man. Still holding my cheek, I saw a figure standing defiantly in front of me. It was Kevin's ex-girlfriend, Polly, who had cheated on him and broken up with him in high school. She stood there, smirking and snorting with a satisfied look. Was I slapped? Wait, did she just slap me? Why? What for? Polly, what the hell are you doing? In my confusion, I heard Kevin shouting from beside me. At that point, the wedding venue burst into chaos. What the hell? Polly, what are you doing here on their big day? Running towards us, shouting, were Kevin's friends from his student days. People who knew about his ex-girlfriend. They often shouted, "Shut up." I was just giving this thief a taste of her own medicine. A thief? What is she talking about? As I was wondering, the ex-girlfriend looked at me with a smug face. You poor thing. You didn't even know he was two-timing you. What two-timing? What does she mean? You heard from Kevin that we broke up, right? Yes. I heard that you two hadn't been in touch since high school. Indeed, the ex-girlfriend snorted with laughter. And then, that's all a lie, she screamed. A lie? That's right. Kevin and I never broke up. We've been together since graduation all this time. What does she mean? And Kevin just stood there pale and silent. Could it be true? Was he really two-timing me? Seeing my lost for words, the ex-girlfriend laughed sarcastically. Poor you, getting married without even knowing that. But I feel even more sorry for myself. I've been with him for such a long time, and now he's been swept away by another woman. Swept away. Well, isn't that right? Kevin and I have been together since high school, long before you. So, you're the one who made a move on someone else's man. The sudden revelation left me standing in shock. I couldn't say anything. Laughing triumphantly at me, the ex-girlfriend said, Well, I don't need a two-timing man like him, so I'm giving him to you. She laughed out loud. It was then when my vision was blurred with tears. Hold on a second. A deep voice drowned out the laughter of his ex-girlfriend. It was Kevin. His head was down, making it hard to see his expression, but after 3 years of dating, I could tell. Kevin was angry. Normally, he was incredibly kind and gentle, seldom showing his anger. What's the matter, cheating man? Could it be that she doesn't understand his anger? Victor, despite dating since high school, can't she realize his anger? A true nature of the slight discomfort that could be faintly felt would soon be revealed. When did I ever cheat? You're still trying to play innocent? The one cheating is you. This with a loud voice that drowned out the smirking voice of his ex-girlfriend, he yelled, You asked me for advice, didn't you? You were unsure about which of the two men you're cheating with to marry? Both are my best friends, and I just scolded you for messing around. Hey, it wasn't just me who was surprised by his statement. What are you talking about? Trying to excuse yourself with such words? At that time, you said that if you hinder my happiness, you'll hinder my happiness too. Is this it? Are you trying to ruin the ceremony and hurt the woman I love? Are you satisfied with this? Do you think this will make you happy? What? What's that all about? Kevin, have you been meeting with your ex? When I timidly asked the fact inferred from the conversation, he looked at me with a surprised face. The face he had been showing towards his ex-girlfriend, in anger turned into a sad face the moment he saw me. I'm sorry. I kept it a secret because I didn't want to worry you. She said she had something she really needed to talk about and asked me to meet her just once. I see. I was somewhat shocked by the news. But I haven't done anything wrong. Just as I said now, this person has been dating the person she cheated on in high school, but she's actually dating another classmate as well. She sent me a message about it, and I couldn't keep quiet, so I agreed to meet and discuss it. You should have told me. Isn't it more suspicious if you don't say anything? Speaking of which, he's obviously down. That's true. I'm really sorry for that. But when I see your happy face talking about the wedding, I didn't want to worry you even a little. I think it can't be helped if you hate me. I won't hate you, but I wish you had told me. We're good husband and wife after all. As I say this, he opens his eyes wide, then quickly turns teary-eyed my husband. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. While crying, my husband hugged me gently. But it didn't end happily there. What do you mean you're trying to end this on a good note? Don't let this man fool you. He was really cheating. Not whether to believe my ex-girlfriend or my husband. I've made up my mind. I've decided to marry this man. I won't be swayed by the words of my ex-girlfriend. When I glared at my ex-girlfriend, she retreated under my spirit. At that moment, a shout rang out, "So you're here." Golly, what next, really? Just as I was starting to calm down, is there going to be another scene? Looking over, there stood a man at the church entrance, someone I'd never seen before. "And Alex, why are you here? One of my buddies attending the wedding told me you were causing a scene here. I thought you had given up on our conversation and ran out. What are you doing?" "I have nothing to talk to you about. I'm just bored of hanging out with you for so long. It's just too dull." A man and a woman were arguing loudly. When I asked my husband Kevin in a low voice, "Who is that?" he looked troubled and explained, "He's the guy who stole my ex-girlfriend from me." So in other words, the man called Alex was the one my husband's ex-girlfriend had cheated with during high school. Except if they were in a relationship all this time, even if it started with infidelity, wouldn't it be considered a pure love story? That's what one would think just hearing that. However, the ex-girlfriend declared, "I think Bob is a better man after all. I've decided to choose him." "Bob? Who is he?" "He's a friend from high school. He moved away for work and couldn't make it to the ceremony today. He just sent a congratulatory message." Why is he suddenly in the picture? Bob is the other man the ex-girlfriend was two-timing with. But when they ran into each other by chance, she lied that she had broken up with Alex long ago and managed to start a relationship with Bob. Because Bob was far away, it seems there was no chance for him and Alex to run into each other. Also, see, Alex and Bob were not particularly close and were not in touch, so the truth didn't come out. Oh, I see. So it wasn't a pure love story at all. Although I do despise Alex for stealing my ex-girlfriend from me. I don't have any hard feelings about it now. I'd no intention of contacting him and didn't plan to invite him to the wedding. But as long as he's doing well, that's all I care about. However, if she was two-timing him with Bob, that's a different story. I was pissed off and gave my ex-girlfriend a piece of my mind. So is that why she caused all this drama today? Probably. She knew neither Alex nor Bob would be at the wedding. Exquisite, and even though she must have known it would come out eventually, she has always been shallow and short-sighted. Carol, anyway, it was only a matter of time before her secret would be revealed once she consulted you. That's why she's short-sighted. A quick glance revealed that the ex-girlfriend and Alex were still squabbling. Anyway, I said, "Excuse me, could you please leave now?" I have no intention of canceling the ceremony, and I'd like to continue as soon as possible. A feast awaits me at the reception. You're planning to continue the ceremony? Ex-girlfriend glared at me with an intense look, but of course, I am. I'm very happy right now, you see. What did you just say? It seems you're a serial cheater. Were you hoping to get involved with my husband as well? Why would I? No, I wasn't thinking. Alex seemed surprised by the slip of the tongue from the ex-girlfriend. What? You weren't satisfied just two-timing with Bob. You were also after Kevin, who's getting married. No, it's not like that. Who would want a man like him? Either way, you were two-timing with Bob. I've had enough. Originally, I took you from Kevin, so I thought I should at least make you happy by marrying you as atonement, but I've lost that feeling now. What do you mean atonement? You just don't want to admit that you betrayed your best friend. Yes, that's right. I'm the worst. But you flitting to another man while you have a boyfriend, you're the worst too. Back in high school, you told me that Kevin was abusing you, that you were suffering, that you needed help. And I believed you. I was stunned. It seems the ex-girlfriend is a pathological liar. She's always telling lies that suit her convenience. Kevin, I don't expect to be forgiven, but let me say this. I'm really sorry for what happened back then. Well, I was in disbelief. Alex sincerely apologized. Apologized with a serious look on his face. My husband laughed and said, "It's okay. I'm happy, really happy right now." Is that so? Alex, who responded, or a somewhat melancholic smile, took hold of his ex-girlfriend Holly and said, "Stop making a fool of yourself." Holly, let's go, and led her away. Wait a minute. I'm not finished talking. Kevin, when you get tired of that woman, contact me. I'm the only one who understands you. Until the very end, she said ridiculous things and left. What was that all about? Those of us left behind in the aftermath. Someone muttered under their breath, surely echoing the thoughts of everyone present. After that, the ceremony resumed without further interruption and concluded without a hitch. We did finish it, yes. I know it might be surprising, but we did. It was only natural. After all, we had been looking forward to it. A full-course meal we had agonized over choosing. In the end, the bride was too busy to eat much of it. Until the fact that I couldn't eat the meal might have made me cry more than any congratulatory speeches from friends or letters of thanks to my parents. As for Holly, I heard from my husband's friend what happened afterward. X had contacted Bob, who had even taken the day off work to be there, and the three of them had a discussion. As a result, she was rejected by both men. And it seemed both had intended to marry her until they found out about her two-timing. Naturally, that cooled their feelings. Why me? What did I do wrong? Don't leave me? She cried and wailed, having conveniently changed her tune after telling Alex she was leaving him in the chapel. Of course, both men ignored her and left. In the end, she clung to men till the end and never showed any remorse. After that, she started reaching out to my husband and every man she knew, it seemed. "I'm a pitiful woman," she pleaded, but no one paid any attention to her. Eventually, she was removed from the group chat and her messages stopped. I heard she's been caught up with some bad guy and is working in a dubious place, my husband said in his usual calm manner. "As in our marriage, we have one rule: no secrets ever. In living our married life, that's our one and only rule." Thinking about it, I really wanted to eat that feast. A pet hotel restaurant apparently has a similar full-course meal, though not exactly the same. Shall we go eat there, really? But it's probably expensive. We got some extra income, so we're good. Let's go! Yay, I'm so excited. Our married life is smooth sailing with my sweet husband. The trouble at the wedding is just a funny story now. So, what's this extra income? Ooh, I may have tried my luck at the casino. What about no secrets? Yeah, you're right. My husband gave a wry smile, and I returned a full one, hugging his arm. My encounter with that cat was purely accidental. It happened on a rainy night 3 years ago. I was rushing home after work. When I was about to walk under a guardrail, I heard the cry of a kitten. When I squinted, I could see a tiny black kitten, presumably just born, shivering in a small cardboard box. It seemed its eyes were not yet open. Inside the box was a note. This little one was forced to bear an ill-fated life. To whoever finds her, please take good care. The note was written in careful handwriting. I could see the gentle spirit trying to entrust the future of the abandoned cat to a cat lover. There was also a $50 bill attached, presumably for milk expenses. My name is Joanna. I'm a 40-year-old office worker. In fact, I just got married the other day. I've been a workaholic since I was young and managed to get promoted to team leader, a notable achievement for a woman. I was quite satisfied with my job, but being single can be lonely at times. From the younger folks in the company, I hear whispers like, no matter how good she is at her job, being without a husband past 40 isn't great, or she seems to have missed out on a woman's happiness. I was aware of such backbiting. There were co-workers who admired me, but still, society's breeze was cooled to a single woman in her 40s. Then, at a high school reunion, I reconnected with Ethan. Ethan was also single and seemed to be diligently searching for a partner but couldn't seem to find one. Actually hit it off immediately, and after dating for a while, we got married. Perhaps like me, Ethan had a simple calculation that he would marry anyone if possible. But I felt a hint of affection for Ethan, an old friend whom I had known since high school. I believed that as we continued our married life, this love would grow. I prayed that it would be so. Upon marriage, Ethan set one condition. That was to live with his mother at his family home. Eng, who had lost his father early and lived with his mother, couldn't bear to leave his aging mother alone. Probably one of the reasons Ethan's search for a partner wasn't successful was due to the fact that living with his mother-in-law could be a hurdle. But the mother-in-law before marriage seemed like a kind person, and she said things like, "I have no doubt about anyone who will become Ethan's wife." I was worried that he might be alone for his whole life, and I'm so glad that it brings tears to my eyes. Like that in the long run, I'd likely have to take care of her in her old age, so I thought it might be better to live together from the start. That's what I thought, and I also set a condition for living together. This was about bringing my longtime cat Max. Max was a stray cat I brought to my apartment complex on a rainy day. Now, he's an essential part of the family. Even when I got married and moved to my husband's parents' house, I couldn't bear to part with Max. I pleaded as such, and Ethan and my future mother-in-law graciously agreed. And so, after a modest wedding ceremony, I stepped into Ethan's family home. However, once we started living together, my mother-in-law, who was supposed to be kind, changed her attitude dramatically. "Joanna dear, now that you're married and are part of this family, you'll take care of the housework every day, won't you?" My mother-in-law sipped her tea with a serene face. Finally, Ethan is married. I can take it easy from now on. I've been telling him to quickly find a woman and bring her home, because my back is back. What? I couldn't catch up with the sudden change. Did she say all the housework was my responsibility? Of course, since I was living there, I planned to do my share of housework. But the way my mother-in-law's saying it sounded like I'd be doing everything. It should have been divided among the three of us, including Ethan. The triads. Wait a minute, please. I didn't get married to become a maid. I tried to assert, but my mother-in-law casually retorted, "Oh, didn't you say you wanted to dedicate yourself to your mother-in-law?" Who said that and when? When I glared at Ethan, who was next to me, he averted his eyes in a hurry. Apparently, Ethan had been lying to my mother-in-law to impress her. Regardless of what Ethan said, I'm not here to be a maid. I will, of course, do my share of the housework, but it should be divided among the three of us. It was better to communicate the truth sooner rather than later for the future. My! Are you suggesting Ethan should do the housework too? Ethan is a man. A kid nowadays, it's normal for men to do housework. If men don't do housework, what happens to single men living alone? That's right. Housework is women's work, right? Even Ethan said something like that. Do these two have outdated thinking from before the 80s? If this was a computer OS, it would have been unsupported long ago. I was appalled inside, but I couldn't say anything more to Ethan and my mother-in-law. I guess I thought it was an important time to play the good wife. And as if they saw right through me, they continued to pile the housework onto me. And so my life in hell began. Hey, don't just sleep in, get up. Start preparing breakfast quickly. My mother-in-law kicked my pillow at 4 a.m. before the sun even rose. My mother-in-law's old, so she always got up early and always came to wake me up without any consideration for it being the couple's bedroom. It didn't matter whether I had been working late the night before or if it was a day off. I jolt awake from a kick to my pillow with Ethan sound asleep next to me. I shook Ethan awake. "Hey, could you say something to your mom?" "It's still 4 a.m. Ethan grumbled something that sounded half asleep. "Mom, to make drink cheer?" "Well, older people wake up early. Cut her some slack. It's actually tomorrow. I'm going back to sleep." I kicked Ethan's pillow away with all my might as he was about to go back to sleep. "You should do some chores too. I don't want to be the only one being woken up." "Huh. Why me? Mom always said that's the wife's job. Like mother, like son." Moreover, even Max, who sleeps in a different room, started to wake up early because of my mother-in-law. Actually, as soon as my mother-in-law woke up, she'd pester Max, which would wake him up, and he would come to me for help. He started making a ruckus with his end-of-the-world-like mowing. It was impossible for me to stay asleep. And then my mother-in-law from the other side would complain about the noise. For between the two of them, it felt like I was being assaulted by loudspeakers from the right and left. I felt absolutely miserable. I loved Max, but I hated my mother-in-law and husband. Even if I started doing chores from 4 a.m., my mother-in-law and husband did nothing but complain about my methods. Please do better. Can't you even do one chore properly despite living up to 40? What a waste of years. We need you to be more aware of your responsibilities as a wife. I was just married. I didn't move in to be treated like a servant. This was not the married life I envisioned. Maybe I should have filed for divorce immediately. But I was 40 years old. As my friends and colleagues had gotten married long ago, and they had been gossiping about me that I missed the boat. No matter how good I was at my job, because I hadn't found the one. I was treated as a loser. After finally getting married, if I divorced so quickly, I couldn't imagine what people would say. It was petty pride, but I just couldn't let it go. Perhaps Ethan saw through that. If you don't want to do chores, get out. We can divorce if you want, but you're the one who'll be in trouble, right? If you don't like it, respect my mom much more. Actually, at that time, I had no choice but to obey. But a life of waking up at 4 a.m. and being commanded until late at night was unbearable. Fatigue piled up, and I eventually collapsed at work. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. My colleague, Sarah, had stayed with me. "Oh, are you awake?" "Good. I was worried when you collapsed all of a sudden." Sarah had been a reliable colleague who admired me. "Thank you. I'm sorry for causing you trouble. I'll have my husband come to pick me up, so it's all right." When I smiled at her, Sarah hesitated. "Well, after you were brought to the hospital, I called your house. But they just said, okay, and also, despite their daughter-in-law collapsing, neither my mother-in-law nor husband seemed to be coming to get me." There was more to Sarah's story. When asked, "Is there anything else?" I was told there's a pile of ironing to do, so come straight home as soon as you wake up. Don't use a cab because it's a waste of money. I was in shock. Not only was I not being picked up, but the only things being worried about were the ironing and cab fare. Was I nothing more than a tool to be used in that house? Seeing me silently devastated to be used in that house. Being me silently devastated. Sarah looked at me with concern. "Emmy manager, are you okay? You seem to have been struggling since you got married." Sarah seemed genuinely concerned about me, and I found myself revealing the truth to her. Etiquette takes 2 years. It was embarrassing to talk about my private life with a subordinate, but I had nowhere else to voice my concerns. "That's what's happening. I'm tired because I'm made to take care of the house from 4 a.m. until late at night. But that's a wife's duty." I tried to force a smile, because I couldn't show my weakness to Sarah after all. But then, Sarah asked with a serious look, "What does it mean to be a wife? Are you a slave? Hey, why are you putting up with this? You should just divorce that man." No. I mean, it's not bad enough for a divorce." I hastily shook my head. Divorce was not an option. What would people say if I did that? That's ridiculous. This isn't right. You're working hard at your job, and yet you're treated like a slave. If this goes on, you're gonna break down. Is your husband worth throwing your life away for? I respect you. I want you to be happier. Sarah's words shook me. That was right. Why was I being used by those people? Why was I continuing this miserable married life? It was due to my petty pride. I finally got married. It would be embarrassing to get divorced. Such feelings were binding me. My current life could be seen as embarrassing from an outsider's perspective. No, I was the one who should be ashamed. I finally made up my mind to divorce. But after being belittled to this extent, I couldn't be satisfied with just getting a divorce. I wanted to make Ethan and my mother-in-law feel even more ashamed. I wanted revenge. After thinking for a while, I decided to wait until Thanksgiving Day to announce the divorce. I quietly continued my slave-like life until the day of the family celebration. Ethan's ancestral home was in the countryside, and it would take a whole day to attend the party held by his family. To the older relatives, including the head of the family, having refrained from attending the wedding of Ethan and I, this Thanksgiving Day was essentially my first official introduction. You better work properly at the ancestral event. If you laze around, I'll be the one who's embarrassed. It's on the train to their home, my mother-in-law jabbed at me. Yes, of course. I will do my best. I forced a smile. Yes, I was going to work among members of the main family tree. As soon as we got to their home, I started working eagerly. I proactively served tea to the relatives, set up sofas, and immediately came to the aid of the elderly who had trouble walking. The usual greetings came to an end and the feast started. I swiftly and beautifully arranged the dinner on the table. My daughter-in-law is absolutely useless and sluggish. She gets older but doesn't contribute a thing. It's so frustrating. But my mother-in-law, it seemed, had been grumbling like this to the relatives before Thanksgiving. Especially the relatives who had been quite cool towards me seemed impressed by my dedicated hard work. She's nothing like the person we heard about. Really, she's cheerful, hardworking, and a great daughter-in-law. And despite such praise, I humbly replied, "Oh, not at all. I'm always being scolded by my mother-in-law. I'm a less than perfect daughter-in-law, unfortunately." Such was my demeanor that the relatives seemed to entirely change their opinion of me. If you're a less than perfect daughter-in-law, what does that make the rest of us? You could very well be the model daughter-in-law. But more and more compliments were heard. Kirai. I lowered my eyes and chuckled with satisfaction. I felt I had made a strong impression on the main family. Then the feast was drawing to a close. It was about time. I stood up, took a chair in the center of the living room, and sat on it. Everyone was surprised when I suddenly sat in the center of the seats, and Ethan let out a confused voice. What are you doing?" Ignoring Ethan, I said, "It seems the feast is coming to an end. I must excuse myself. It is truly regrettable that I am parting ways with you all after only just having the pleasure of meeting you." Having the pleasure of meeting you. I've decided to divorce Ethan. This will be the last time you see me. I thought I would enjoy time with you just once, so I did my best to show my gratitude. I wish you all the best. I finally delivered the speech I had prepared, and the relatives stirred. The most surprised were Ethan and my mother-in-law. What's this sudden talk about divorce? I will not accept this. That's right. Divorce is no joke. Calmly, I replied, "Oh, but weren't you the one saying I should leave? If you hate housework, leave. You'll be the one who's worse off if we divorce." After some thought, I realized that I won't be troubled at all if we divorce. Then I turned to my mother-in-law. "But you've been pushing all the housework on me while I work, while you just lie in front of the TV munching on snacks. And you've been telling the relatives that I'm lazy and slow. How could you say such things about me, who is woken up by you at 4 a.m. to do chores?" I declared this with indignation. That's right. I heard it too. She said she had a no-good daughter-in-law who does nothing. So, I thought some terrible daughter-in-law would be coming, but that's not the case at all. Atins, the relatives had been watching my hard work at the Thanksgiving celebration. I continued. I tried my best to maintain the household because I wanted to become a part of this family through marriage. But neither my mother-in-law nor Ethan acknowledged that, and I've been falsely accused. I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Hey, wait, Joanna, calm down. The mother-in-law tried to smooth things over, looking anxious about the reactions from the crowd. It was already too late by then. I'm perfectly calm. As if anyone is panicking, because the truth got out to the relatives. Isn't that you, mother-in-law? Next then, it was Ethan's turn to stammer. Joanna, are you joking about divorce? I just wanted you to be a good wife, that's all. A good wife? I was so ticked by that word. I stood up and looked down at Ethan coldly. So, what kind of good husband have you been? Shoving all the housework on me and splitting the living expenses with my salary. Is that your idea of being a good husband, picking and choosing what you like? That's a huge mistake. That's right. Joanna's absolutely right. At the gossip of the relatives, my mother-in-law and Ethan were silenced with red faces. Then my grandfather-in-law, who had been silent all along in the main family, asked to speak. I'm sorry. Joanna, my daughter has caused you a great deal of trouble. My grandfather-in-law is the father of the mother-in-law. Since she's 67 years old, he must be over 90. He still held great power as the head of the family. He was definitely aged quite a bit, but he was energetic in his chic clothes, and his voice was still strong. My grandfather-in-law started to tell a shocking truth in front of his family. One day, a great-grandchild in the family brought back a stray kitten. The kid wanted to keep it as a pet, but the relatives vehemently opposed it, so he had to reluctantly give up. My grandfather-in-law felt sorry for his great-grandchild and took care of it. He asked a servant of the family to take it to a place far beyond the child's reach. Actually, the servant, as instructed, placed the kitten in a box under a guardrail and waited for a kind-hearted owner to pick it out. Joanna happened to come across it. Next, the servant confirmed where the owner lived and reported it to my grandfather-in-law. The letter and money left with the box were from my grandfather-in-law. I was shocked. My grandfather-in-law had been worrying about the fate of the kitten and had ordered the servant to occasionally check on Joanna's apartment. And then he found out that the owner was going to be a bride in our family. That kind-hearted woman. My grandfather-in-law was deeply moved by the wonders of the world. I was deeply moved. I never imagined that Max, the kitten from that time, would come to me because of such a fate. That letter had been from my grandfather-in-law, who was sitting right in front of me. I quietly took out the letter I always kept in my wallet. My grandfather-in-law's handwriting looked distorted through my tears. She has always been a crafty liar since childhood. At first, I'm sure she only showed Joanna her good side, and then as soon as you guys got married, she thought she had you and changed her attitude. I didn't teach her enough. My grandfather-in-law turned his face towards my mother-in-law, and then he looked me straight in the eye with a look of regret on his face. No, it's not your fault, sir. I regret that I couldn't do much for you in such a short marriage. Hastily thinking that it might be good to show off a little in front of the relatives. I tried to spice up the story with a bit of flattery. You are a fine daughter-in-law. To neglect such a woman is unforgivable. These two need to reconsider their actions. My grandfather-in-law's angry voice echoed throughout the room. Therefore, I command you, the grandfather-in-law bellowed, release Joanna at once, and both of you shall pay her damages. Wait. No way. At my grandfather-in-law's shocking order. Ethan's mom and Ethan himself were in a panic, their mouths agape. She's been grievously inconvenienced by you. It's only fair. My orders are absolute. You better remember that. It's for bestie, and you'll be instantly banned from this house. And forget about any inheritance. No way. My mother-in-law and Ethan let out screams of disbelief. After Thanksgiving, I returned home and immediately began packing my things. I had prepared somewhat for this day, so it was just a matter of packing various things into my bag. I told myself not to forget Max's daily necessities. "Where are you going?" Ethan, flustered, asked me as I quickly packed my things. "I found an apartment where I can live with Max. I'm going to start a new life from there. The matter of damages can wait." Ethan mumbled to himself, lost for words. "Just so you know, playing ignorant won't get you anywhere. I've made arrangements to stay in touch with the family who have shown sympathy for your grandfather and me. If anything happens, your grandfather will be contacted immediately." But my mother-in-law, who had been listening, looked furious at being unable to respond. She scratched her head like a furious monkey and screamed, "Oh, for heaven's sake! If you're going to leave, then just go." She then threw my bag at the front door. I've hated it from the start, this creepy black cat. "Take that," as she reached out to the items I had gathered for Max. "Stop it," for before my cry could hold her. Max moved swiftly. Max let out a growl and, before I knew it, had jumped on her back, his claws tearing into her clothes. My cashmere, my silk scarf. My mother-in-law, who dressed up in expensive clothes for Thanksgiving, was now screaming as her clothing was being torn apart. X turned to Ethan and arched his back, hissing. Ethan retreated to the wall, his eyes tearing up. What a wimp, scared of a single cat. "That's enough." "Max." At my call, X jumped onto my lap. "Thank you for avenging me." I stroked Max. X purred happily, rubbing his head against me. "I got a divorce from Ethan. As in by order of Ethan's grandfather, a substantial sum of money was deposited into my account as damages. Ethan and his mother apparently had to sell their house to make the payment. First mother and son, now live, huddled together in a small apartment. I informed my high school classmates in detail about what had happened, and Ethan's reputation plummeted. He probably won't be able to show his face at any reunions ever again. I returned to singlehood. For the first time, I realized that working hard at my job and living freely with Max was much happier than staying in a marriage I didn't want. Sarah, my colleague at work who woke me up to this realization, said, "I'm glad for you. No offense, but you've become even more beautiful since your divorce." She cheered me up with her flattery. Don't tease a divorced woman. "Come on, back to work. Back to works," I encouraged Sarah. "Yes, I have a fulfilling job, reliable colleagues, and when I come home, there's Max. What a blissful life. I'm really glad I realized how important these ordinary things are." I looked out the office window. The usual view was spread out before me, as if nothing had happened. "I'm right, time to get to work today." "But why are you okay?" I was confused with John's pointless response. I thought he knew about Lisa's car accident. How could he behave like this? Even though I had contacted him, he didn't visit Lisa in the hospital, and he arrived home in the morning smelling like booze. I was just confused. Nuts, well, actually had an urgent task at work. Actions, but I had already checked with his workplace and confirmed that John hadn't been working. I let out a sigh as John still tried to lie and cover it up. Can't you even tell me the truth? I guess, of course, you can't, right? There was no way I didn't know what he'd been up to. I, armed with irrefutable proof, began my retaliation. If you think I haven't noticed anything, you're making a big mistake. My name is Kathy Thompson. I turned 57 this year. After my first son, Brian moved out when he got married. I was living with my husband, John. Even though I was just an ordinary housewife, an event occurred that shattered my peaceful life. The trigger was the car accident of Lisa, Brian's wife. One weekend, I received a call from Brian. Lisa's been in a car accident. When I heard the news, I felt the blood drain from my face. What should I do? Mom's car is in bad shape, too, and this is still unconscious. Calm down, Brian. I'm heading to the hospital now. Can you tell me which room she's in? Brian had also just received a call from the hospital and seemed quite flustered, despite his explanations being incoherent at first. Brian finally got calm, and I was able to get the details from him and headed to the hospital. I immediately called John while I was out, but John didn't pick up the phone, no matter how many times I called, and I was puzzled. Why isn't he picking up? But what on earth is he doing? I ran out of patience and decided to head to the hospital first. Upon arriving at the room, Brian had directed me. There were Lisa with her body covered in distressing casts and crying. I knew it, but John was not there. Haven't you seen Dad? Well, he's not picking up his phone. I have no idea where he could be. That's odd. I called him before I called you, and he picked up them. What? I couldn't help but gasp at Brian's words. It seemed Brian had explained the situation to John just as he had done with me, but John had yet to arrive. What is he thinking? Could it be work or something? I don't know. He just says he's going out for a bit. I had a rough idea of what he was up to, but I let out a sigh at John's attitude, unchanged even in this emergency. Etc. and periods. I was outraged at John, who didn't answer his phone or visit the hospital room despite hearing about the accident before I did. In the end, John never showed up from the time we listened to the doctor until we left. I swear when he gets home, I'm gonna give him a piece of my mind. Yeah, thanks for coming, Mom. I would have been panicking all day if I was alone. It's all right. This is nothing. But more importantly, you need to toughen up from here on out. Got it? Yeah, I'll do my best. That's according to the doctor. Lisa is not in life-threatening danger and should be able to leave the hospital in a few weeks. But just as I started to feel relief, I was told that Lisa has damage seriously to her lower body, and she would have to live her life in a wheelchair from that time. In addition to his regular job, Brian would have to bear the large responsibility of caring for Lisa's daily needs. I couldn't find the words to encourage him, so I just patted his hunched back. "If you need anything, just call me anytime." "Thanks." "Nah, I'll probably need your help with a lot of things, but I'll try my best too." After seeing off a completely dejected Brian, I left too for home. I was determined to do my best to help them as much as I could, but for that, I had to have a serious talk with John. That was what I was thinking, but when I got home, John wasn't there. I checked, but there were no returned calls, and despite waiting until late at night, Ben didn't come home at all that day. What on earth is he thinking? Not even calling or anything. I thought maybe he got held up at work, so I called his office just in case. But of course there was no such thing as John being called in on the weekend. For a moment, I thought, could John have had an accident too? But I quickly shook my head. I could guess his actions easily. I sighed in exasperation, quickly decided to cut my losses, cleaned up the dinner I had prepared, and went to bed. But John didn't come home until the next day. It was nearly afternoon on a Sunday when I heard some noise. A noise at the front door and a barely standing, yet seemingly in a good mood. But John staggered into the living room. "Welcome back. Seems like you had a great time. Kathy, why are you here? Why shouldn't I be in my own house?" John, who entered humming a tune and smelling of alcohol, completely changed his expression as soon as he saw my face. His eyes wide opened, he stared at me looking pale. Even when I asked him, "Where have you been all this time?" he just panicked and didn't answer. "Oh, what? You've heard from Brian, right? Lisa is paralyzed from the waist down and will live in a wheelchair." "Hey, Lisa!" I cut off a visibly confused John and asked him what I wanted to know. "What were you doing in such a difficult time?" I asked, mixed with anger. Without listening to my words, John let out a carefree voice. "I heard about the car accident. Then why did you come home at this hour without even contacting us?" "But why are you okay?" At John's incomprehensible response, I was confused. Is he still drunk and confused? Even John seemed to not understand, and our conversation was not aligning. "What did you hear from Brian? That your car was in an accident and he went to the hospital?" "Yeah, that's right." "So? What's so strange about me being fine? Weren't you the one driving the car?" Finally, in John's own words, I understood and said, "Oh, I see now." It seems that John misunderstood the news of my car accident, which he heard from a phone call with Brian as an accident involving the car I was driving. Indeed, at that time, Lisa was the one driving my car. But I hadn't used the car yesterday as I was out for some business. I had promised to lend the car to Lisa because she wanted to borrow it. Brian was so panicked. "I assumed you had a serious accident," John said. "You've received calls from me, haven't you?" "What about that? Didn't you check? I thought Brian had used your cell phone to call me." He seemed very panicked, so he assumed he was calling multiple times because of that. The more I listened to John's explanations, the more it didn't add up, causing me to furrow my brow. It seemed odd that he would ignore a panicked Brian, knowing that there had been a serious accident, and not answer the phone. He also didn't come to the hospital, despite misunderstanding that I was the one involved in the accident. He says on top of that, he acted irresponsibly by going out to drink and only coming home the next afternoon. As I struggled to understand what John was thinking, he watched my face and remained silent. So, when you thought that it was not Lisa but me, your wife who had the accident, what were you doing and where were you? Actually had an urgent task at work. I called your office too because you wouldn't answer your phone. There was no work for you, was there? Seeing John mumble and fumble with his words, trying to lie and cover up, I sighed. Can't you even tell the truth? But I guess you can't, can you? What are you talking about? I can clearly tell where and what you were doing yesterday. What are you talking about? I was not at the office, but at a colleague's house. Enough. If you think I haven't noticed anything, that's a big mistake. I took my phone and showed John a picture attached in an email. It was a picture taken last night when he was out. The picture clearly showed where he was, what he was doing, and who he was with. Seeing it, John's face turned. Why do you have such a picture? It's a convenient world, isn't it? That second season husband's infidelity investigations are undertaken. That picture was part of the investigation report I received this morning from the detective I had hired. I couldn't thank the detective enough for getting in touch immediately, stating that they had finally caught John out. I've known for a long time that you've been unfaithful. No, I wasn't unfaithful. It's a misunderstanding. I knew you'd lie and claim your innocence. That's why I endured until I had clear evidence. Then, for about half a year, I've been quietly preparing for a divorce without letting John find out. When I consulted a lawyer, they advised hiring a detective to gather solid evidence, which I did on the days I suspected John. I had wondered if it was worth it at this age, but this incident has shown me his true colors. It's said that a person's character is revealed in emergencies, and this must be it. I couldn't fathom spending even a single second more as a family with someone like him. Even though you've been very careful so far, you've made a big mistake this time. Why, after going to such lengths to cover your tracks? It just happened. I was drinking and got careless. You've been drinking with your mistress all this time, haven't you? Why, John? John, obviously uncomfortable, mumbled his words as if there was still something hard to express. I made it clear that if he continues to lie or try to deceive, it's him who'll be at a disadvantage. John then started to talk reluctantly. I thought if you were in the hospital, I wouldn't need to sneak around anymore. And if it was an accident, there'd be insurance money and compensation from the other party. It felt like a sudden windfall. And I just ended up drinking too much. Windfall. I was rendered speechless by John's words. Words. In other words, when he thought I had been in an accident, his first emotion was joy over the prospect of money coming in. It seems like he's been happily drinking with his mistress in anticipation of receiving insurance money and compensation. My mouth hung open in astonishment at John's utterly deplorable behavior, which far exceeded my imagination. This is what they mean by being too shocked for words. So, this was the first thing he thought of when he believed I'd been in a car accident. You're despicable. John, listen, a man will always be a man. And yet you, older than me, you've given up on being a woman. So what? You think it's fine to have fun drinking with younger girls? You must be joking. I cannot continue to live with a man who thinks like this, let alone consider him family. He became defiant and started blaming me. Do whatever you want. But cry out. I don't want to deal with such troubles, and I've been in touch with a lawyer about divorce. Serious? Did I do something to you? I would refuse to look after a man who, rather than coming to the hospital in an emergency, betrays his wife and indulges in fun and benefits. John kept making no sense, so I've given up persuading him. But with no chance of taking back his words, John finally agreed to contact a lawyer. It may have been a heated argument, but finally, I felt freed from the hardship and patience I'd endured until now. Well, now that we're divorced, you need to leave this house. Fine. I'll do that. Keep in mind that I don't have any money to divide with you. What? I thought I was going to get some money thanks to you, so I spent a lot. How can I split what's not there? John said this, grinning unabashedly. I was amazed that he could be even more despicable when showing his true character. I've got clear evidence now, and above all, I've no more affection for John, who valued money over his spouse's safety. I wanted to hit him with the harsh reality. It's all your fault. You've made a mess of my life. John. What? You don't need to say that much. You've been unfaithful, and I totally waste my time because of you. I've confessed everything and apologized, so it should be okay. What are you talking about? I haven't heard any proper apology from you yet. I was not sure if he's really believed that or is just confused, but either way, he should respect people more. As John looked at me with an annoyed face, I didn't feel like arguing with him, and tried to say something, but I cut off it saying, from now on, let's communicate through lawyers. Nevertheless, John started with some irritating excuses. I raised my voice. Enough! You can't just do as you please anymore. The conversation was going nowhere, so I decided to retreat to a hotel for the time being. While there, I took the opportunity to explain the situation to Brian over the phone and told him about my plans for a divorce. Brian was left speechless by John's outrageous behavior. I was hesitant to involve Lisa, but Brian seemed to scorn his father even more than I did. Mom, come stay with us once things settle down. What? You're leaving the house, right? If you haven't decided where to go, you're more than welcome to stay with us. But what about Lisa? All the more reason we'd feel stronger with you around. I'd have to discuss with Lisa as well, but I ended up deciding to impose upon Brian and his wife. The stance of thinking about the future was rather depressing, but Brian's words gave me the courage to fight against John once again. Just days later, when we involved a lawyer and got an explanation about the divorce process and the division of property, John couldn't say a word. His attitude was clearly different from when he was talking to me, but I wasn't surprised considering John's weakness for authority and titles. So, that concludes my explanation. Do you have anything else to discuss? No. Nothing. I sighed in relief, thinking I should have done this from the beginning as everything finally came to an end. Much as John had said, our savings had been used up, and there was hardly anything left to split. Therefore, I decided to take home items as a small supplement. However, upon seeing the moving company enter the house, whom I had arranged to coincide with my lawyer's departure, John tried to hinder me until the very end. Hey, you're taking that much? What's gonna happen to my life? Hey, you can't complain. We've discussed through the lawyer. We use those things as a family. I have rights too. You're the one who betrayed this family. Don't you get it yet? As things as our possessions, large and small, were carried out, the house began to feel more spacious. Seeing this, John seemed to panic, worried about his future livelihood, and started to complain. He was particularly noisy when they were about to take away expensive items, like the microwave and refrigerator that had just been replaced. I paid for those. I have the right to use them. Don't just take them away. I paid for half of them. Besides, you can't even cook. They would be wasted on you. John, who could barely prepare frozen food to be heated in the microwave, wouldn't use these things even if we left them. I've taken these items to use with Brian and Lisa would be more meaningful, so I took all the kitchen items. But John was a pain, clinging on to the end. I knew he wouldn't easily agree to a divorce. Says he was inherently incompetent at life. It was only when the last piece of luggage was carried out, and I was about to leave the house that I finally heard an apology from John. Kathy, I'm sorry. I see. I intended to separate my home life with you from my love life with my mistress. In fact, I see. I wanted to leave as quickly as possible, repeating my lackluster responses, but John started saying things like, I really don't want a divorce. I don't want to split up. You must be kidding. No matter what you say now, we can't go back to how things were. Then, at least, could you come over to cook? Pardon? She can't cook, so there's no way we can live together. I was flabbergasted by John's words until the very end. Why did I ever live with such a man? Feeling that way? I sighed again. Of course, I couldn't entertain such nonsense, so I left the house without saying a word. About a month after the divorce was finalized, while supporting Lisa's life, I was living a challenging yet enjoyable cohabiting life. Ike's husband, John, came to our house. Brian, surprised at the sight of him through the window, said he was going to the door while trying to hide behind mine. While Lisa and I were quietly listening from the living room, we heard the following conversation. Brian, how have you been? Getting along with Lisa? Thanks to you, life without you is very enjoyable. Don't say that. Your dad's had a hard time too. I couldn't help but frown and exchange glances with Lisa at John's audacious remarks. It seemed that his mistress cheated on him and ran away because he couldn't take care of himself without me. But John, having lost all his reliable contacts, appeared to have visited us out of desperation. Friends and relatives who knew the reason for our divorce would naturally not assist him. He seemed to be struggling a lot, unable to survive by himself. But of course, Brian, who knew the situation well, wouldn't accept John. Relentless, John kept saying absurd things like, I now understand the feelings of those who have been cheated on. And I apologize. I want us to get back together. You have Lisa and Kathy, don't you? I'm all alone. I want to live together as a family again. Stop joking around. It's your own fault for betraying the family and losing trust. Excuse me, can I say something? And it seemed that Lisa, who had been listening with me, couldn't stand it anymore and went to the entrance in her wheelchair. John, looking somehow pleased, was abruptly told by Lisa, I understand your situation. Heard sharply told by Lisa, I understand your situation. Actually, my mom also got into a traffic accident, and she needs care. What? My legs are like this, and it's too much for Brian to support. Brian to support 2 people. So, we don't have the capacity to take care of you? Is that so? Lisa seemed to have deliberately lied to drive John away. Among John, who disliked dealing with trouble, it should work effectively, and I couldn't help but grin at her quick thinking. However, John responded in a way that was beyond our imagination. While barely managing his own life, John's eyes lit up. Really, he said, grinning slyly and letting these words slip out of his mouth. Well, anyway, let's put Kathy in a nursing home with insurance money or something. Then we could live together. He raised his voice as if to say it was a really good idea. Brian and the others froze, unable to say anything. I covered my face with both hands. You clearly haven't learned anything, you fool. But Kathy, you're here, aren't you? Skipped us again, didn't you? What do you mean do? Shut up and listen. All you do is make shameless remarks. Stay out of our lives from now on. I yelled at him with a red face and drove John away. At Twig's further, he was surprised by my fierce look. Even John quickly withdrew with a grimace on his face. I looked back at Brian and the others, gasping for breath. We forced a bitter smile at each other, as if after a storm had passed. I hope he won't come again. Was he always like that? I feel like we suddenly can't communicate anymore. I don't want to deal with him ever again. Some time passed again. Just without any more onslaughts from John, we heard rumors that he had to go and live quite far for work. Having regained a peaceful life, I've continued to live modestly and joyfully with Brian and his wife. We've renovated the house to be more wheelchair-friendly. Lisa's rehab went well, and although it was slow, she recovered enough to walk without a wheelchair. It was a recovery so miraculous, even the doctors were surprised. That once I can walk more, I'll take care of you. Kathy, thanks, but you're getting ahead of yourself. I'm still going strong. Lisa's scars, which were said to possibly remain after the accident, are now completely healed. But once she's recovered more, we've set a goal of going on a trip as a group of 3. We plan to go to a famous national park that Lisa has been wanting to visit, probably something like Yellowstone. It's with a goal in mind. Lisa's motivation has skyrocketed. While supporting her dedicatedly with Brian, we are leading a lively life. This is a very ordinary and healthy family, and it is also my happiness.